You saying what you were?
Yeah, so I think the point of that issue was, we cannot get complacent. We cannot get like pillowy soft. Now that we have our paradise, we have to keep our teeth there. And then Xavier gets like straight up whacked the first at the end of that book. And so it's just driving home that point that while the X-Men do have this paradise now, they still have to be themselves and be out there. And that's what the team of X-Force is about. So I enjoyed it, but I can see your point as well.
For sure. I mean, I agree in the sense that I think it was relevant to like contributing to the narrative of everything as a whole. But like I said, what kills me is when Jonathan Hickman has an idea and a lesser, and I hate to put it this way, but when a lesser writer is taking something that could be a diamond and is churning out coal, why would I not want it written by the guy that's going to give me a diamond? And you know what? Like, I'm 100% going to go back and read the stuff that happened after I dropped it. Cause I dropped everything right before X of Swords. I was buying every X book. I just couldn't keep up with it.
I still am.
Well, that's your stuff though. You know, like that's your bread and butter. So I don't blame you. And you like it, like you enjoy it. So that's what matters most. My heart breaks because I'm not buying the main Bat title anymore. But it's this weird dichotomy because most of the time I'm like, we don't need any more Batman books. Like, stop oversaturating the market. Like, I'm a Batman guy, but I hate this. But like, on the chance that I'm not buying the main Batman book, I do like options. Like,
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22,
Yep. Did you read this week's Detective yet?
I have not. No, I'm behind on Detective. I haven't read current books in about a week and some change, just getting all of this stuff settled with the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So I will very soon. I'm thinking about reviewing it. I haven't found anything in the last week that I was like, I really want to review this. Cause it takes so long for me to edit something that like, if I'm going to review it, I want to make sure it's something that is worth the review, whether it's like excellent or something that has like some very valuable things for me to break down.
Exactly. Yeah, I understand that because there's we talked about this in text the other day, but I have a positivity bias. I paid $4 for this book. I want to enjoy it, so I'm going to find the positive among the negatives, however many negatives there are. And a book has to be pretty bad for me to go, okay, yeah, this one wasn't great. But there's a lot of books that land like right there in that zone where I'm like, I don't feel strongly about this book one way or the other, and I'm like, I don't know what to say about this. So those usually like float down the pile until I have to finally get around to it. But
yeah, man, I've just the last year and a half I've become so much more trigger happy at dropping books, and actually we can thank Tom King's Batman for that, because when that happened I was like, you know what, no longer will I spend money if I don't like a book. Also because I know, and this will kind of lead into our topic for today, is that it contributes to, when people speculate or buy books because they're just used to it or conditioned to, regardless of if they like it. That's what tells these companies to keep doing it. So by not buying it, you're sending an actual message, as opposed to me just being an angry little fuck on Twitter, which I can be sometimes. So
there you go.
Leading into everything, I do just want to address everybody that's already joined us in the chat. The one and only Nerds come saying, what's up, my nerds? Not much, man. Excited to sit down with WildeBeard and shoot the shit.
Absolutely.
The wonderful John Thomas, Beard, and Trev, what did I do to deserve this? Huge congrats. Trev too, by the way. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for backing.
Congrats. Do you want to tell them what they're being congratulated for?
Sure. Yeah. So if anybody is watching it right now, I have a Kickstarter to a really dope sci-fi noir comic book called Area 51, the Helix Project, which you can get a little glimpse of behind me here. You can click the link in the description below. We have about a day left, just over a day. But we are funded, so everything is guaranteed to be published and printed. This is the campaign for issue 2, but issue 1 is still readily available. There's not a lot that I can say that isn't already written for you on the Kickstarter campaign in much better and succinct detail, because I'm a babbler. It's what I do. There's also a cool dramatic trailer there, promotional art, amongst other things. We got a lot of really cool rewards for you. A lot of the big ones have already been taken. You know, we did have a reward where you could get drawn in as a murder victim, which was my favorite, but somebody actually wised up and pulled that. So,
Good deal.
between copies of the book and whatnot, you know, there's plenty available. And if you're worried about a comic book that's going to stand the test of time, these babies are printed on nice premium quality paper, high gloss. I mean, you know, WildeBeard got copies
Yep,
of the first issue.
I did.
He can attest to it himself.
Yeah, it was good. I think one of the things I find when I'm reading just like a regular floppy is like I'll hold it in my hand, and like when I'm done, it'll have like weird like fingerprints on it, like the heat from my hand just made it dimple or something. I didn't have that with that one. Good paper stock. So good call on that one.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I wanted to make sure not only was the storytelling and the art worth your time and money, but also the material. And that comes out of my end too. Like, I don't make any money. What I want to do is pride myself on the products that I'm able to put out and the storytelling that I'm able to do with my team. And I think that especially, I mean, you know, I have not had anybody that has come up to me and said, this looks like your first comic. Nobody has thought that. And that's the greatest compliment of all. So if you haven't already, give it a look. Check out the link in the description. A lot of great art. I think that alone will sell you on it. Like I said, we're trying to hit some stretch goals before it ends tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also do, for those of you that are backing it, or maybe not yet, if we can hit $7,500, what I actually want to do is to take a share of the 800 plus copies that are coming my way and pay for them to get expedited so that I can get everything to everybody about a month early, which would be freaking great. I would love to do that, but unfortunately, because my books are printed in China, that can be quite costly. And so in order to do that, we need to hit a little bit higher of a mark. And yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, I think we've delivered a book that means something, a book that is entertaining, and something that's easy to connect to. So I hope you guys check it out. And I'm thankful to everybody that already has. You guys, you have my freaking heart in your hands, and I'm appreciative. Let's see. Mark McKeever says Batman, Superman, and Nightwing are gems from DC as of late. I haven't. I read the Batman, Superman Future State. Have not read Gene Luen Yang's outing on this actual mainline issue, but it looks interesting. Totally agree about Nightwing. I think we're in the same boat about Nightwing, are we?
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't read Batman, Superman either. That's I'm not a big Superman fan, so those don't float into my poll list. But Nightwing, perfect book, like 9.8 out of 10. It was absolutely incredible. And, you were talking earlier about, telling DC that you don't like a book by dropping it from your pull list. And Nightwing, during the height of Rick Grayson, was one of the ones that I actually pulled from my pull list. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I dropped it for like 6 issues. And then when I heard they were kind of winding that down, I jumped back on. But man, coming from Rick Grayson into Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo, incredible.
So good. What a transition, huh? Like,
yep.
Also, for those of you that haven't watched this, both of us have reviews on Nightwing number 78, that first outing of Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo. You can click the link to my channel, subscribe there. Also, click the link in the description to WildeBeard's channel, subscribe there. Check out his Nightwing review as well. We both had some really good things to say about it. So,
if you have, and if you haven't been reading Nightwing, it's a perfect place to jump onto it. Even if you're unfamiliar with the character, I think it's still a great place to get to know the character.
Totally agree. I'm gonna hopefully not butcher your last name, Keith Dushek. What's up, gents? What's going on?
What's up, Keith?
Thank you for joining us tonight. The marvelous Mark McKeever says, I was so happy for you when I saw that you had met your goal. Looking forward to issue number 2. Thank you so much, Mark. Your support is almost cripplingly kind, except for the fact that I need to be functional so I can deliver that comic book. So we're here. We're moving. Nerdscum says, Area 51, the Helix Project is great. Thank you so much, brother. Talking about Swamp Thing 2 being a gem of DC Comics. Let's see. Joe's Geek Show says, what's up, bros? What's going on, buddy? Thank you for popping
in. What's going on, Joe?
And same to BT Productions. Only so many ways I can answer that question, but we're doing good, man. Comic book funded, hanging out with WildeBeard. Let's get the show on the road. So, hey guys, welcome to the 72nd episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comic book community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics, whether it be stories, creators, constructs, adaptations. We hit it all this week. For the first time, it is a milestone. I'm sitting down with the one and only WildeBeard Reviews to talk about the comic book speculator market, but not to reiterate something a million people have already asked, but how are you, man? It's good to have you on.
I am doing well, so I have to say thank you to you for having me on. Being more collaborative within the comic book YouTuber community was something that I had on my year goals for 2020. So I'm about 4 months late, but 2020 was weird, so I get to check that off. So thank you for hosting me on my first live stream. I'll try not to embarrass myself or you over the course of however long we're on here.
You're good, man. You did more preparation for these conversations than I ever do. So,
Well, there we go.
I have complete faith. But on that, tonight, like I've said, we're going to be talking about the comic book speculator market and my grievous distaste for it as a comic book writer, by the way, which it's got to tell you something. This is authentic. So, Franklin and I have been kind of talking about collaborating for a while, and we were spitballing ideas, and I feel like this is going to be unique because most of the videos you see on YouTube are praising speculation or condoning it. And well, I'm not condoning it. I'm not promoting it. And here's why. My general premise or thought behind it is that it more than anything shepherds spectacle over storytelling. When a new character appears for the first time, when something seems like it can provide monetary gain, that's when people go and support it. And as a creator, that really does kind of break my heart. And I think it also forces a lot of solid creators to try to churn out royalty machines or first appearances in order to get you to buy the book off the shelf. And from my perspective, it's about the art. It should be about the writing. It should be about the storytelling. It should be about the artwork on the page, not so much a character appearing for the first time. And sure, I think that's a cool, nostalgic sort of sentiment. But at its core, like I personally buy comic books because they look like they're going to be fulfilling to read or engage with. So I don't know. That's just me. I mean, WildeBeard, how do you generally feel about comic book speculation? Because I know that you've kind of admitted to doing that on a handful of occasions.
I've done it a couple of times, but it's very, very light. So I think when we talk about speculation in the confines of this video, it's the people that like rush into the shop and try to pick up like 10 issues of whatever hot book is going on right now and then try to flip it on eBay like that night for a profit. That's what we're talking about right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought like Naomi issue 4 because I heard that one was good or hot, and I knew she was going to be coming into Justice League at some point, and now with Bendis's run. And then I was in the shop this past Wednesday and I picked up Berserker, the Keanu Reeves comic. I was originally going to pass it up, and then I heard it got picked up for a show or something, and I was like, all right, fine. I'll pick it up. But it's mostly because I wanted those, and if I could get them off the shelf, then I was going to. I had no intention of then just flipping them to eBay to make some sort of profit, like some sort of hustle or something. I still wanted them so I could read the stories and then have them in case they went up in value later or something. But I have no intention of just trying to grab a stack and throwing it on the bay and hoping to profit.
Yeah, and I think that there's like a hierarchy of my distaste for speculation. If it's like just a fan being excited, yeah, sure, like I can deal with that. But when it's strictly for monetary gain, it's like not only are you just turning comics into a stock market, like this is an art form, right? Like this isn't the stock market for a reason. You're also depriving other people of the experience to buy a book that they actually wanted to read, right? Like You're just gonna have it. If you're just gonna have it in a bag and board or grade it to sell it, like you're depriving somebody of doing what these books are meant to be done with, and that's
Yep.
read.
Yeah.
BT
So
Productions says something similar. He says his take on the speculator market is that they make it way harder for people who want to read the stories to get those books. I
yeah,
agree.
exactly. Yeah, so we just came out of DC Future State, and I probably read more Future State than I needed to. But one of the
Same.
ones I wanted to, I have a stack this thick over there that I haven't even gotten to yet because there was just so much of it. But Future State Teen Titans was one that I wanted to read, and when I got to the shop on Wednesday, they were sold out of it because Red X, a character that appeared in the Teen Titans TV show or the cartoon, that was his first in comic book appearance, and I was like, oh, you guys sold out of it. I should have called and gotten one reserved, but yeah, the shop owner or the worker said, yeah, that was the hot spec book this week, and they sold out. And then he went and got me the personal copy that he pulled from himself so he could sell it to me. It was the Wonder Woman 1984 variant cover, but I'll take it. It's okay. So yeah, it's the people that run in and try to grab that stack off the rack and flip it that hurts the people that just want to read the story.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that it hurts me because I read that story and I think it's horrible. Like,
Oh, it was terrible.
it was so
awful.
bad. And mind you, I picked it up with excitement for two reasons. One, because I grew up watching the Teen Titans animated show. Like I was probably like 6 or 7 when that show came out. So I used to look forward to watching that every weekend when I would go to my grandma's house, and so it holds really fond memories for me, aside from the fact that it was Rafa Sandoval on art, who is one of the biggest hidden gems in comic books, if you ask me. So I actually went into this wanting to enjoy it. And then we get like Dick Stroke and a bunch of really unnecessary plot problems and bad dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So, it kills me because, like we were saying earlier, it becomes more about the spectacle, about the first appearance, than it does about the actual quality of the storytelling. And now what? Now, I'm not saying that this writer isn't talented, that they haven't done things that are good, but now this person, because of the sheer first appearance of a character, is going to get to steer that angle of the DC universe. I'm sorry. Like, as a reader, as a fan, I don't trust him. I don't trust him. But sales talk, sales speak.
Yeah. So it's interesting you talking about how the spec market drives spectacle. I was reading up on the 90s speculation boom and bust that almost took down Marvel Comics itself. They went bankrupt and had to, all of that stuff. But the Wikipedia page on it said ran from about 1985 to 1993, and it kind of started with Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, Watchmen, and then Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's when people started to realize there was something maybe more to these comics, both narratively and then eventually monetarily, where they could collect and then sell these books. And then it ended with the death of Superman and Nightfall, when everyone ran out, bought the shit out of all of these books, and now people have long boxes of the death of Superman in its poly bag, and it's worth not even worth the paper it's printed on because everyone has one. And so it's that spectacle is at the beginning and the end of the speculation boom of the 90s that almost took down one of the big 2 publishers.
Well, it happened all around. I mean, speculation, honestly, is why comic books struggle to sell, 100,000 copies. Back way before I was reading comic books, all of the top 10 were selling over 100,000 copies, not just the top 1 or 2 of the month. And it shows because people became disenfranchised. Like you said, you had people that bought the Death of Superman thinking that they were sending their kids to college by selling those things. And these publishers knew that, and it's not just the publisher's fault, because people were corroboratory, like they fed into it. And they didn't really think it through. Like if you have 1 million first print copies, surprise, first print copies aren't going to be worth anything.
Exactly.
So it really did redefine things, because you look at that, you look at what was happening, and mind you, I am Modern Image's at least number 5 spokesperson on the planet right now. I'm in love with everything they're doing. But when that company started, they were all about the hype. I mean,
Oh yeah.
almost all of Image's original line of superhero characters or whatever you want to call them were derivative of something else that already existed. We're all about
Hmm.
taking advantage of gimmicks and chromium covers and glow in the dark covers, and
Yup.
who knows, the list goes on. And that's part of, and it's not Image's fault that DC responded, but DC was in such a hole after losing their number 2 publisher spot that's why they killed Superman. I mean, one could
Wow.
then say that Image Comics killed Superman because DC was desperate. So it's not even just that, it didn't only bring down Marvel Comics, it brought down the whole industry. And part of what I think is helping to keep the industry afloat now is that it is a really cheap mining area for film and television with the incitation of the streaming wars.
Right. Yeah. And I think, yeah, going back to something you said a second ago with the covers, like chromium covers, hollow foil, glow in the dark. I worry that we're circling back around to that, because when I look through the full list of comics that are coming out every week to prepare for my What's on Your Pull List weekly video that I do, I see so many like number ones that are coming out from DC and Marvel, and even some of the smaller ones, but they have like 10, 12, 15 variant covers. Like, yeah, there's the 1-in-1 covers that ship like with a 50-50 ratio or whatever, but then there's like the 1-in-10, 1-in-25. Like, this publisher has a specific one, or this particular artist, or you have to go to this con. And I'm worried that we're just kind of cycling right back through a lot of those same problems again.
What astounds me, is that obviously these businesses are going to do it because they know it makes them money. The fact is that it still makes them money.
Yeah.
And that longtime fans, new fans, many of them haven't actually realized that by contributing to that, you're perpetuating this cycle all over again. And while I don't know if we're going to get back to that point necessarily, it is frustrating. That's all, for example, Dark Knight's Death Metal was, and Dark Knight's Metal. Covers, metal foil. I don't know. They could have a Yo Mama cover for all I know, and people would buy it. So it's really, like you said, it's frustrating to watch and see the burgeoning or the rebirth of this really vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And on that, Joey from Joe's Geek Show poses a really interesting question here, and he wants to know how to speculate. Does speculation help the industry? He's seen this debated a lot, and I think it's a pretty simple answer. WildeBeard could totally disagree. I think it's a temporary boom. It doesn't last. And the difficult thing is that when you're speculating, you also have a lot of room to make mistakes. The speculating leads a lot of these poor comic book shops that have to order their books 3 months in advance without knowing really anything about them, to take risks in order to survive. And if they take a really big risk, they're also liable to take a really big loss that they can't afford. But
Right.
also, again, you see it consistently throughout comic book sales month to month or year to year, is that when you have these big spectacles, you get a quick spike, and it can be a massive spike, but the drop off is huge.
Yeah.
And the real secret, in my opinion, as an amateur comic book writer and publisher, is to incite sustainable sales, as opposed to getting
100%.
that spike, gradual growth, or even maintenance for that matter, because runs don't maintain numbers as you get farther and farther away from issue 1, until you
Yeah.
get to spectacle numbers. But what do you think about that?
I was so touching on a couple of things that you were talking about there, like sustainable readership is, or like month over month, the guys like you and me that run into their shop and pick up their giant stack of floppies, that's what sustains the industry, not flash in the pan speculation. I actually found an article from Bleeding Cool from February of last year, when Hell Arisen #3 was coming out, one of the first appearances of Punchline, and he told his customers, this guy Brian Hibbs owns a chain of stores, of comic shops in San Francisco, and he said, if you're here to buy Hell Arisen 3, you have to buy Hell Arisen 1 and 2 to go with it. I'm not letting you buy issue 3 for spec unless you buy the other two. And then somewhere in here, he actually says that, the comic book industry has almost been destroyed multiple times by speculators and greed. That was during the spec crisis in the 90s and things like that. People trying to flip comics or making it so people who only want to read them can't do so. So a lot of the things that we're already talking about. And he says, what we need is the people that come in every week to buy the books, to buy the comics, because they're wanting to read the stories. They're wanting to see the artwork. They're not the people that are coming in there to buy the one book that they think they can, turn a profit on really quickly. So I think speculation complicates the market more than anything. I don't think it's a yes it helps the industry, or no it hurts the industry. I think it's somewhere in between, because I think we need innovation and new characters to keep things fresh for characters that have been around 60 to 80 years in some cases. So I don't mind a new Punchline character every now and then. I don't mind a Clown Hunter character, but it's the reason for those new characters needs to be artistic and driven for the story, not just to say, hey, we made a new character so we can bump sales.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked behind the scenes, about just how we're feeling. For example, just using the Tynion Batman run. Like, one of my biggest issues is that it feels like it's creatively deprived, because the intent behind the run is one, inventing royalty machines that Tynion will make money off of later, but also for the spectacle. You get sales because it's the first appearance of Clown Hunter, the Gardener, the Underbroker, Punchline, the hoo-ha, the who cares, like, and that's what kills me, is because the run for me has constantly felt like a game of first appearances as opposed to a Batman story. I mean, issue 1, they're like, yeah, we're going to introduce the new Bat Doodad, and then issue 2, the other Bat Doodad. Like, can we just tell a Batman story? I mean, I have nothing wrong with creating new inventive characters, but there's also like dozens of other like C and D list Golden and Silver Age characters that sucked, that could use reimagining. That's like one of the reasons why I love Grant Morrison's Batman so much. What Scott Snyder did with the freaking Crazy Quilt in his run was freaking genius. So it just goes to show, when you're doing that rapid Bendis succession of creating characters, it's either for royalties or spectacle or both. And it's indicative, I think, of a larger problem in the industry.
So one of the other things we were talking about behind the scenes, and I just thought of this as we were talking now, kind of a parallel between the current Batman run with all of these new characters, along with Grant Morrison, his new X-Men run. He made a ton of new characters in that run, similar to Tynion right now, or Tynion, but it served the story, because Grant Morrison's new X-Men was this new class coming into Xavier's school. So the story required a bunch of new characters, and then he went out of his way to make them all real characters. And I think just about every single one of those characters is sustained today in one of the myriad X-Men books coming out. Quentin Quire, the Cuckoos, Glob Herman, some of the other ones in there as well. Maybe not some of the villains like Cassandra Nova or something like that, but those are villains, they come and go. But it's will these new characters that Tynion is coming out with right now, will they stand the test of time, or will they just be, let's sell Hell Arisen #3 off the rack?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Like, there's nothing wrong with creating new characters, because there's a lot of power that's behind that. But if you're going to do it, they need to have a purpose, and they need to have a purpose that nothing else is going to be able to fulfill. In equal parts, it needs to be organic. I mean, I get it. Comic books, unless you're selling 3 out of the top 10 books in the industry, you're not making crazy cash. But it leads to this point where these creators are sacrificing artistic integrity for that speculation, for the ability to create a royalty machine and sales on that back end, or on the immediate end, I should say. So great question, Joe. I think that promotes a lot of really cool conversation.
Absolutely.
Mark McKeever says that we mentioned fans will buy books to flip quick on the internet, but in his opinion, the worst problem is comic book stores inflating prices due to issues of on the day of release. That's a problem.
That is a problem.
I agree to an extent. I don't think it's worse because comic book stores are put in a really rough situation. One, they have a relatively slim profit margin on a product that isn't worth a lot, and on a product that is becoming increasingly devalued because of all the competition in the entertainment market right now. Like I said earlier, they're also forced to order their books 2 to 3 months in advance with knowing almost nothing about them, with having no insight as to what those numbers might be, aside from perhaps a well-educated guess at best.
Right.
So, you know, I do see price gouging at some stores, and it can be frustrating. But I know even my local comic book store, just knowing that, he has to keep the lights on. Sometimes, like a week after it comes out, yeah, he's going to raise the price of a book if it's super hype, because otherwise he's not going to be around next week to sell more books. So
Yeah.
it's a catch-22, and I think that you're going to have to use your best judgment in order to figuring out whether or not a shop is worth giving your money and the way that they're handling, and that's ultimately up to you. But again, I think the problem that is more indicative of is that these comic book stores that are the lifeblood of this industry are being squeezed, and that's something that I think we should fix in order to help satisfy that problem.
Yeah. And so just for this question, I think the problem with if stores take a book off the shelf, bag and board it, and slap like a $10 sticker on it, they wouldn't be doing that if the spec market didn't demand it of them. If the opportunity wasn't there for them to do that based on people themselves coming into the store and grabbing them and trying to do that on the internet, then they wouldn't have to do that, or they wouldn't have the opportunity to do that. And they may not have to. I mean, it's going to depend on every shop. Maybe if a shop is having a bad week and they need to squeeze something else out of the rack, then obviously every shop is different, but it's just another second or third order impact from the spec market on its own. The shops are doing that presumably in relation to what is already happening, and they're just trying to keep up.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. You said it perfectly. It comes from so many different ends, and like we're both kind of getting to, it all points towards bigger problems in the comic book industry that are just not sustainable, if we're being frank. And this isn't a doomsday, the comic book industry is dying story. No. Because if it were dying, I wouldn't have changed my field of study after 3 years of molecular and cellular biology to become a writer. I mean, certainly it's the less safe call, but it's a call that I figured would be satisfying both personally and financially to some degree.
And I wouldn't say that the comic book industry is floundering or flourishing right now. I think it's nice and steady. And I think if the pandemic over the last year has taught us anything, is that art and things like that still have a place, and it's the stuff that people turn to when they can't do anything else. And just the amount of properties that are being picked up by streaming services, whether it's Disney with all the Marvel stuff, or Netflix picking up Tinian's Department of Truth here recently, or Umbrella Academy. It's good stories will sell no matter the medium. So I think comics are doing just fine.
Yeah. It's rough because, like I said, as somebody who's looking to build a career in comics, I do have to look at the potential fallout and try to be as objective as I can, because not only does this become an element of my fandom and my hobby of making videos on YouTube, but it will eventually contribute to my livelihood. So the problem that I see is that comic books are stupendously unique, and that's not being showcased enough. I think the problem is that comic books, although a lot of that stigma of being a comic book reader is washed away, it is still not generally handled with the same prestige that maybe a film would be, or a novel, or even poetry. And that's a problem. I think comic books need to be exposed as something just as valuable as a storytelling medium, because people still look at it as children's fantasy, which it can be in the same way that film can be and prose can be. But that does not encompass what it is entirely. And BT Productions also brings up a really interesting point about how, the comic book speculation creates a false sense of interest that causes the companies to overprint, which is bad for the industry and the environment. And I've never put this in the environmental context before. And I think it's a really, really valuable insight. But I agree with you totally. The overprinting also creates a false sense of sales, because sometimes these bigger publishers with these incentive variants will try to squeeze these retailers. I remember Marvel like 2 years back were like, yeah, you can't get this cover unless you order 5,000 copies. Otherwise, you're not
Yep.
going to get the actual cover that everybody wants.
Yeah.
And I remember that being a huge problem. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what a lot of the variant covers are, like the 1 in 10, 1 in 25. You have to order 25 of the regular cover to be shipped that variant. So maybe if they know they have a customer that wants it, or they know that they can sell it, they'll have to order more than maybe they think they'll sell of the regular book, and then so that they can get the one that they know that they can sell, and that just creates waste, and it's hard on the environment because you're using paper that's not going anywhere. And
Yeah, I think that was a really great insight from BT Productions. He also brings up the Dark Knight's Death Metal number 4 Peak Shimamoko 1 in 45 Yo Mama variant. If DC does that, I want my money. Or I want to write Batman, but hey, I'll take money too.
There you go.
Joe brings up the point that you'd brought up as well with the Hell Arisen fiasco, talking about how normally for him on Wednesday there might be 6 of them at the doors before they opened, but there was a line, people pushing, shoving, reminding others, not even his kid. And I know his kid is, I mean, she's a peanut now, but she was really a peanut back then. So for people to like get all rough and grungy, that's the thing that does kill me, is that I'm a comic book guy. I love other comic book people. I love meeting people at cons, but that lack of like social and spatial awareness that is consistent throughout this community is jaw-dropping, man.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So yeah, and I mean, I guess in the case of Hell Arisen, we can blame speculation on that. Speculation. Yeah. Speculators are not spatially aware. There, I said it. Let's see. Keith says part of the speculation for local comic book stores is knowing their community. When he worked for one in the 90s, that was actually so much part of the fun. The community made the Wednesday the best day of the week. That's fair, but it's that speculation in the 90s that also really damaged the industry. I mean, 1992 was almost 30 years ago. You know, that was back when Image had first started up, when everybody was competing and doing the Bebop covers and the first appearance of Hoo-Ha. Like, and we're here 30 years later and we still haven't recovered from it.
So to that, I mean, I worked at a store for almost a year in one stint, and then for a few months, a couple years later in another stint. And I think Wednesday was the best day. It was the most tiring day because typically we got there at like 7 or 8 a.m. to do all the polls for the subscribers, and then the store was open from like 12 to 7. So it was a brutal day, but it was also the day you got to see the most customers and have your most buddies came in and everything like that. You had your Wednesday regulars, and it was always a blast, even if you went home just completely blown out at the end of the day. But I'd rather speculate on like the new stories. Like someone comes in, it's like, oh, was this book good? Not like, is this book worth $40 on eBay? I think there's a different kind of speculation going on there. And, I mean, obviously eBay wasn't a thing back in the 90s, but, people, I'm sure rolling in to grab, tons of Death of Supermans, they weren't there for the story. They didn't want to see how Superman died. They wanted to see how much money they could make. I think there's a fine line there.
Yeah, and like I've been thinking about this, and I was like, if you're going to speculate on anything, speculate on people, speculate on the creators, right? Like their ability to tell really impactful stories. Like that's I mean, that's what I do. I as much as I like reading various characters, it doesn't matter that the book exists if the right people aren't on them, if that makes any sense. So I'd rather go out of my way to track down, a really good Ed Brubaker book than I would read a Batman book. Now, I have Batman tattoos. I don't have Ed Brubaker tattoos, but I'd rather go read an Ed Brubaker book no matter what he was doing. He could be writing a book about the Peach Momoko Yo Mama variant, and I would probably read it as opposed to Batman.
There you go.
So, you know, and I see, you know, Mark McKeever's comments about buying variants for things. And listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with a couple of variant covers here and there. It redresses the product in a way that gives variety to other people. And I buy variants. There's some books that I just think the art is so stunning that I want one of each. And if you're buying variants for the sheer enjoyment of that alternative art,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. That's part of what makes comics so freaking good. But
Yeah.
you know, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I don't think variants are inherently bad or wrong to enjoy. Don't get that from what we're talking about here. I just think that it gets to a point where like the gimmick, like maybe the 90s where you had like chromium covers, glow in the dark covers, maybe that was a thing back in the 90s, but I think there's a natural equilibrium to that where it has to be a sustainable amount. And as long as you're buying it for your enjoyment and not to just pick up and then try to quickly hustle it to make a profit, then that's a big difference. Like if you're happy with the product that you're paying for and it means that much to you,
Mhm.
do it all day long. I don't care. I'm not going to judge. Please have as much fun with this hobby as you want. But if you are hustling within the hobby, that is something completely different.
Yeah, totally agree. And the big thing again is that we were talking about speculation for money as a means to make money and causally deprive somebody else of an experience that you don't care about. Like if you're doing it for the money as opposed to the
Right.
reading experience or enjoying the art, that's totally different. If you're buying it to read it and enjoy it, well then that's your prerogative. That's what the hobby's for, to enjoy these things and to
Yep.
value them not in a monetary way, but in a number of other ways, because I can't really tell you how you're going to personally value your stuff. But I mean, hear me out, man. Like I'm buying the Gary Frank and the Jason Fabok covers for Geiger. You know why? Because they're gonna look good, and the book looks great. And just from a sort of appreciation standpoint, they're creators that I love, they're creators that I trust, and knowing that it does contribute to the overall sales of their book, I want to see them succeed because they have entertained me for years,
Yep.
because they have made me laugh, cry, and smile time and time again. So it's all about the experience. If
Yep.
if you're buying covers to further your experience as a reader and as a collector, that's awesome.
Yep.
That's what it's for.
Yep. I wrote a note in my show notes that says I don't mind comics being worth money and collected as investments, but and such. But when a comic shop has to pull their stock and put it behind the counter to keep it away from speculators, that's an issue there.
Mhm.
So yeah, like if a customer is buying it for themselves to have just the pure enjoyment of owning a particular cover, just the pure enjoyment of reading that particular story, then that's one thing. Just keeping it away from the eBay hustlers, that's something completely different.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and Nerd Scum talks about how he used to run a comic book store and he hates the markups, and he furthers by saying something that I didn't even think about, was that some shops will put a smaller number out on the shelf already marked up, and then once those are out a couple days later, put more out for more inflated prices. That's ridiculous.
That
That
is ridiculous.
in my mind goes so much further beyond a result of comic book stores being squeezed by the
Yeah,
industry that they're trying to support. That is
absolutely.
greed.
That is 100% greed. Yeah. Sounds like Nerd Scum isn't very scummy. Appreciate that, bud.
Yeah, you got give yourself credit, pal. BT Production says, yeah, people have been saying the comic book industry is dying for years. Yeah, it's gonna happen. And while I'm not necessarily saying the comic book industry is flowering right now, it's not dying. It needs to grow and change. And I think the big problem is that a lot of the bigger publishers with the platform are continuing to make mistakes that they've been making over the last 80 years. And you would
Yeah.
think that with 80 years of experience, they would learn from those mistakes.
Right. I think this goes back to something you said a minute ago, was the comic books are still regarded as something childish or kiddie or something that you do but you don't talk about. But the comic book properties themselves are at their absolute peak in the public consciousness. So we have to figure out how to like get people into the paper side of this hobby, not just going to the movies. It's like, yeah, you know that Guardians of the Galaxy movie you loved? There's comics. You want more of that? It's right here. You just gotta go find it.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of reasons. First of all, the problem is, like you're saying, people that watch the movies, it just doesn't translate to comics. Like, people will say that it does, but it 100% doesn't, because there's a drop off of fans that is equal to the flow of fans coming in from movies or television or what have you. And there's a couple reasons. One, people don't like reading. It's much easier to watch something on a television screen.
That is
And
fair.
you pay depending on where you are, for a movie, anywhere from 10 to 20 bucks. And you get 2 to 3 hours. You pay for 10 to 20 bucks comics, you might get an hour and some change. And like Mark McKeever had suggested in one of his earlier comments, and you're getting something with diminishing returns in terms of the quality of the product itself, and sometimes the story. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been shy about saying that I hated Future State, with the exception of a couple gems. I am buying less DC than I've bought in a very long time. And that's because that's less about the quality of the product physically, because I do take that into account, and more about the quality of the actual storytelling. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is a good comment here. I like this one.
Huh?
The one you got up for Mark right now.
Oh, yeah,
older
yeah.
comics.
Yeah, so Mark asks about, is there, pun intended, with is there an issue with the past comics, with speculating on past comics? I don't think that's as much of a problem. I think that falls into the general sphere of collectibles. You see that with anything, whether it's sports cards, other trading cards, sports memorabilia. It's just bound to happen. My biggest problem is with collectors of modern things, because they affect the market, right? They affect the market in a big, bad way that is going to leave a lot more of a lasting impact. And it also affects people's livelihoods now, like these
Right.
creators, these companies, these people that are out there busting their ass for no money to tell really good stories. And it's kind of heartbreaking, because I relate to that now. Like, I genuinely relate to that now, busting your ass to kind of just squeeze out on top. And you get totally bum rushed by, a market that is based around speculation as opposed to thoughtful storytelling. And obviously there's going to be different strokes for different folks. Everybody likes different things. Everybody wants different things out of their comics. But, the problem isn't necessarily that people are collecting and buying things because they want to collect them. It's because now they think they're going to make a profit. And if it's something that's not being printed anymore, I don't really think it hurts anybody, because let's be real, there was only a limited number of those things printed. It's not like you can go back and clone them or what have you. Problem is now, where you have all these different printings and whatnot, it does affect the comic book industry to a much greater degree.
Yeah, I think what we've mostly been talking about, like he says, is the current comics, and it's kind of a first market versus a secondary market conversation. So the first market being like comics that are hitting the shelves right now every Wednesday, those comics being spec'd on without, just because they have a new character in them. It's like, oh, is this character going to be big? I'm going to buy out all of these or anything like that, and that affects the way DC, Marvel, Image, whoever, that affects their current business practices. However, if they're going to lean into a certain character, or how much like a comic shop feels they need to buy or order or something. With older stuff like White Vision, West Coast Avengers 49, that's like 40 years in the past. That's a completely secondary market question at this point. That is now just, like you said, a limited number of those copies exist, and that's just the general collectibles market kind of fluctuating with what is popular right now, or what character shows up in whatever Marvel property we're talking about. So like current direct market versus secondary market of Marvel's already long forgotten about the first time they put out or published an appearance of a White Vision. They don't care anymore. So it's what's going on right now versus what was going on previously.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for that, I guess we might even need to develop like a new language, for describing speculators of the of the direct market as opposed to the long overdone collectibles market. Because I like I said, I think that you hit the nail right on the head there. When one is actually affecting an industry and one is just a pastime hobby that really, what I mean, who is it bothering besides somebody that maybe lost an auction on eBay, as
Right.
opposed to actual livelihoods, and the direction of the industry. Like we were talking about earlier, regarding how your money is your voice, like your dollar is how you express yourself. And when people are buying the 1 in 45 Peach Momoko Yo Mama variant, and not a thoughtful, well done story over here by some indie creator, or even somebody working on some D-list character that tells them what direction you want the industry to go in, and because they see dollar signs on one end and none on the other, they're going to go towards the dollar sign. It's a
Yeah.
scale, like,
Yeah.
and everything at some point is just going to tip over. And I mean, if it keeps going and or gets worse, you're just not going to be able to reverse that.
Yeah. Or it'll hit a point where it'll bust, and we'll have the 90s again, where Marvel will almost die. Although they probably won't die, because now they got Disney dollars. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think it'll just change the way they package and distribute these things. I don't think comics will ever die. They're still a quote unquote cheap source of entertainment. And right now, I don't think the entire comic book industry is thriving. I think the indie market is beginning to thrive in a way that it hasn't, in a big bad way,
Right.
and in a more sustainable way, like we were talking about, which I think is wonderful. And that's what's drawing me personally to indie right now. I've been kind of on the indie train since like before I started writing myself, and more so now that I sort of understand all of the different confines around that.
Yeah.
But
I feel like I've pushed more into the indies as well. I was away from comics for about 10 years. When I jumped back in, I went, straight to my bread and butter, my superheroes and punching books. But as I've, gotten back into that, and for a lot of my fans have, suggested books, and I've jumped on those, like Undiscovered Country, Department of Truth, Something is Killing the Children Once in Future. Those are really just sometimes more exciting than the regular big two stuff.
oh yeah, I've been so I'm notoriously known for just not being up to date with my incoming books, with my pull list. But I found as of late the stuff that I've actually been wanting to read early or the week of, because I get press copies, are the indie stuff. Like you know what I'm gonna read when I get my preview copies this upcoming week? Geiger. Everything else, couldn't really care less.
Yeah.
You know what I read a couple weeks ago? Noctera. Why? Because it was exciting. It was interesting.
Good book.
You know what I read in preparation for my interview with Ram V? The Many Deaths of Layla Starr. And you know what? Those couple of indie books that I have reviewed, or in the case of Geiger and The Many Deaths of Layla Starr that I will review, they're infinitely more positive than the last handful of books that I have reviewed from the big two. And it just as somebody who considers themselves relatively conscious, it makes me more likely and more exciting to pull the greater source of my sample size from independent publishers.
Yep.
So, and I think you're seeing that a lot, honestly. I think you're seeing a lot of us that are sort of indoctrinated into the veteran status comic book readers begin to kind of start looking towards indie, because of the dissatisfaction of all of the gimmicks and frankly the general, I think, decrease in quality from the big two. And if you caught me 4 years ago, I would have refused to read indie comics. I'd have been like, nah, I'm just going to stick to my at the time I barely read Marvel, by the way. I was mostly just a DC guy.
Yeah.
And that all changed because of the quality of the storytelling. And
Yep.
From a slightly different angle, it seems like you have a sort of similar pathway yourself.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, and it's a little bit of response to my audience. It's like, hey, this book is really good. It's like, okay, well, I'll pick that up and because my audience is demanding that, and maybe not demanding it, but recommending it to me. And I feel like as a creator myself, creator, whatever, a reviewer, let's call it that, or critic, if I can even aspire to that, I feel like I need to respond to that because that's what my audience is asking of me. And so I lean in that direction and find I kind of like it. So I can just keep going that way.
Absolutely. And everybody has their gateway drug into the world of indie comics. And I think nonetheless, most of the time it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's pretty organic, and it leads to, I think, a general enjoyment of that material as opposed to numbers for numbers sake.
Yeah.
Mark McKeever says, I'm just supporting Area 51, the Helix Project Kickstarter, so that when Trevor becomes incredibly famous, I'm making bank at all my side issues.
There you go.
Well, one, I hope I can do that for you. So, and that I think will also be indicative of a great many things I have aspired to, like becoming our generation's or my generation's Alan Moore, which I'm not totally confident on, but you know what? It's a high platform to climb to, and it'll keep me climbing. And as long as I'm climbing up as opposed to falling down, I'm in good shape.
Yep. So we've talked about specking on current books. We've talked about specking on old books. Got to talk about specking on Kickstarters. That's where the real money's going to be. That's the next big market. That's where it is.
I mean, you saw it with Berserker. Like, I mean, and it is an indie published book. Like, it's going to be printed by Boom regardless. But, Keanu Reeves does a book about an immortal Keanu Reeves doing Keanu Reeves from John Wick things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about that?
That's gonna sell. That's gonna sell.
And I don't know. I am curious as to what that means with Kickstarter, because now crowdfunding is becoming such a viable means to do this. I mean, even huge names are coming to this platform. Publishers that already do this stuff are coming to this platform for pre-orders. Apropos the Noctera Collector's Edition, which I have up on my shelf.
It's on a box somewhere over here.
Right. The Berserker, Sean Gordon Murphy brought his big thing to either Kickstarter or Indiegogo. I think it was Indiegogo. I don't quite remember. But yeah, so it is curious. And, I know I'm saying don't speculate, but if you want to speculate on one book, you got to click the link in the description below. Help me make a career for myself, ladies and gentlemen. Area 51 Helix Project, link in the description below. Check it out. We're actually just a handful of dollars away from $7,100. So if you would like to be the one to cross that line, that would be lovely. Still just over a day left, just a hair over a day left. A lot of progress we can still make, and all of that money goes back into the book, which means it's better quality product for you. That means you're going to get everything sooner, and that means that I don't have to go to bed stressing myself to death. So that would be lovely. You can talk to a bunch of the folks in the chat that have contributed to the Kickstarter. You can talk to this gentleman that I'm talking to now. But I think that if you do decide to back the project, you have the potential to receive a wealth of really cool rewards, including the actual high quality book itself, whether it be the incredible artwork with the creators that I have surrounded myself with, and I am proud to work with, whether it be my writing, because I'll give myself enough credit to say that I think it's pretty solid, or the really cool producer shirt or the really cool producer sweater that I will never reproduce again, with an actual eye for design being brought into it. So you got an option. And if you're upset about speculators, about the big two, I got you. So give it a look. I would super appreciate it. And yeah, so Nerd Scum says at this point he follows creators, whether it's indie or an IP. He usually doesn't care. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have my favorite characters. It's just bound to happen. But I'm a lot more likely to read creators. Like if you told me Jeff Lemire was doing a book about Bobo the Chimp's hat, I'd read it. I'd do it. You know what I'm not reading right now? Batman. You want, like, I'm again way more likely to go the creator route, and I'm curious with you, man, because I know that you seem to kind of be leading in that direction, but I don't know if there's a world where you stop buying like X-Men or any of your favorite characters. Would that ever happen? And if it
There,
would, what would need what how bad would it need to be to push you to do that?
there's probably not a world where I stop reading X-Men.
Hmm.
Um, Other stuff, probably like if Kate leaves Thor and it's not good anymore, I'll kick Thor. We talked earlier about I kicked Nightwing. Some of the other like DC books that I'm reading, I've dropped those, like Grant Morrison's The Green Lantern. I
Hmm.
didn't care for that, so I kicked it. I don't think there's a world where I stop reading X-Men, but I think everything besides X-Men from the big two, there's a world where I stop reading those. And I
Hmm.
have found that I have started to follow creators to the indies, like Tinian over to the Department of Truth. Something is Killing the Children. He was one of the writers that, reading some of his Batman Detective Comics stuff from the beginning of Rebirth,
Hmm.
specifically the scene where Tim Drake sacrifices himself. I found that on like Imager or something, and I was like, I want to read that. So
Hmm.
that plus Tom King's Batman brought me back into the world of comics, and so that kind of brought me back. But now that I will follow those writers into other things. So Tinian and Scott Snyder into Noctera. Tom Taylor a little bit. I didn't quite get into Seven Secrets. I read the first one. I might pick up the trade when it comes out. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think the big two books are a great way to leverage characters that you know to introduce you into creators that you don't, and then you can follow those creators elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. You know, like Batman was my gateway drug to Scott Snyder and Grant Morrison, and
Yep.
kind of technically Tynan. You know, like, and now, frankly, I think Tynan's indie shit's better than his Batman stuff by leaps and
I
bounds.
won't
So
disagree.
yeah, yeah. So and mind you, let's add this with a caveat. I generally like his Detective Comics run. I actually own an original page from that run.
Nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Eddie Barrows, oh, chef's kiss,
Oh
so
yeah.
good. Um, but yeah, and I think that's how it is for a lot of us. You know, there. I mean, I definitely have friends that I can understand why they are so attached to a character because it means so much to them and they refuse to drop it. And I totally acknowledge the fact that because my favorite character is so oversaturated, there's a really good chance that I'll have at least one Batman book that I'll be able to enjoy. Um, and you know, it's the pickings have been slimmer at sometimes more so than others, but you know, like I said, I am also the first person to say, yeah, we too much Batman, knock it off. I don't want everybody and their mom doing a Batman story. You're
Yeah.
diluting the character and his mythology. Also, like, give me a why don't we have a Green Arrow book right now, but we have 12 Batman books.
Right.
So you know, I say that knowing that there is a quote unquote silver comic book spoon in my mouth, I guess.
Yeah. That's fair.
Let's see. BT Production says people buy more Kickstarters because the creators actually advertise the product, unlike companies who put out these books. Maybe. Um, yeah. I mean, I agree with the sentiment that I don't think big two publishers really advertise their comic books much or very well.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't quite know with Kickstarter because m- my brow wasn't necessarily raised about like crowdfunded comics until it had already kind of become a thing. You know, I wasn't thinking about it as it was beginning to rise in terms of um, viability. But yeah, I mean, uh, yes, Kickstarter comics do well because the creators are promoting them, but it's also because that's the only way they're going to sell. You know, you don't just put them on Kickstarter and they're going to move. You know, you don't have the immediate strength of an iconic character or a property that somebody out in a third world country is going to recognize, you know, regardless of where they come from or what they do. You know,
Right.
like you walk over into countries you've never even heard of or probably can't even pronounce, and you wear a Superman shirt, they know who that is. You
Right.
wear a Area 51 the Helix Project shirt, they're not going to have a fuck fucking clue what that is, where it comes from. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that the ultimately the commentary that you're trying to raise there makes a lot of sense, but I think that it's kind of like just a foregone conclusion that like Kickstarter comics don't survive unless they're, you know, they're promoted, because they just don't have the step up that these other books
Yeah.
do.
Also, I think like for Kickstarters like yourself, it is intensely personal, and it is a labor of love. So you are trying to, you know, scratch and scrape and make sure you make it over that line that you need to, and no one's just going to find it by, no one's going to back a Kickstarter, or at least most people won't, just scrolling through Kickstarter. Oh, I'll back this one. I'll throw this some money. You have to go out there and on your social medias get people to share it. Say, I'm excited about this book for these reasons. Please back it. And I don't think we see a lot of that from the big two. I mean, we've talked a lot about movies and TV shows and how that could be the perfect gateway drug to get people to read the comics, but they're just not, because it seems like Disney and Warner Brothers are perfectly fine people not coming to the comics. Like there is such an opportunity there for them to, you know, get down into the comics. Like even just a cheaply produced trailer before the movie plays in theaters, if we ever get to go to theaters again,
Mhm.
says, hey, you like this movie you're about to go see, go buy this particular book that this story was based on,
Mhm.
and you'll have that much more enjoyment. And then it's a gateway drug. They get hooked, and then they buy more. So I think BT has a point there where, you know, the big two could do a lot more to advertise their stuff rather than relying on the community itself to do their promotion for them, or just kind of, you know, blandly posting the stuff on their own social medias.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like you were saying, simply like even making a kind of crappy trailer does a lot of work. And being fully transparent, right? I'm looking at the exact numbers. My Kickstarter right now has 112 backers. 58 of them watched the trailer at the top of the campaign. Half, just about half of all my sales came from people that watched my stupid little trailer that I made. That's pretty big. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you know, and the other half comes from people that might have bought issue one, the absolute ass ton of promotion that I've done, but half of them have watched that trailer.
Yeah.
And that says something.
Yeah, it would be. I know DC and I think maybe Marvel has made some trailers for some of their books. Like I think Last Night on Earth they had one for, or maybe even Future State. Like DC had a little thing about it, but it seems like promotion like falls down the hill. Like when Warner Brothers has a new trailer, like the Suicide Squad trailer that just came out 2 days ago or whenever that was. Like Warner Brothers YouTube channel will post that, and then DC will post it as well. But if DC has a trailer for a comic, Warner Brothers won't post that, but if they did, how much of a bigger audience could they get with that? Like if you, like immediately after you posted the Suicide Squad trailer for the movie, post another like 30-second spot, maybe even tag it at the end of the Suicide Squad trailer itself. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we've got an Ostrander omnibus coming out. You like this movie? You're going to want to read this book because this is where these characters come from. So it seems like it should be pretty easy. They just don't do it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I feel like there's certainly a lot more to be gained than there is to be lost. You know, I mean, if I can do it, like they can do it. You
Right.
know, like I I never edited a single thing in my life before I started doing this, and even then,
Same.
I'm hyper inconsistent. One of the biggest compliments that I get on my stuff is the editing, even more than the stuff I pride myself on, right? Like I pride myself on being an analytical douche, but people are always complimenting the editing. If I can do
Yep.
that, you're telling me Warner Brothers
Warner
doesn't have the
Brothers.
resources to pay
Yeah.
somebody like $15 an hour to make a good trailer? I'll do it. I'll
Yep.
do it. Shit.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. And like WandaVision was just one of the biggest things in the world for like 2.5 months. You tell me they can't, chuck $100,000 to produce some crappy little video for Tom King's The Vision. It's like, hey, you like this kind of story? This is where a lot of that came from.
oh,
Check
dude,
this out.
not even. I guarantee you it would cost them
Yeah.
less than a quarter of that. Like
Yeah.
for mind you, that was the number one show in the world for
World.
months.
The
And
world.
you couldn't throw like let's just I feel like I'm being liberal with this. 10 grand. 10
Yeah.
grand to make a trailer for Tom King's Vision run, which is like the closest comparison. You know, I've
Yeah.
definitely said that I think people overblew like the connective tissue between this and that, but there is like
Right.
a similarity. 10 grand
Yeah.
at most. And you make a kick-ass trailer, you get people in on it. I've literally had people ask me, I don't know where to go. I kind of want to learn more about Vision and Scarlet Witch. What do I do?
Yep. There's not a day I scroll through our comic books on Reddit that there isn't someone or multiple people asking, "Hey, I want to read more about character X. Where do I go?"
Mm-hmm.
It's all right there. And if there's a hunger for it, and the companies just need to figure out how to answer that hunger, and they'd be rolling in it.
100%, dude. I totally agree with you. Nerdscum says, God, the Rebirth Detective was so good. The whole Clayface arc still tears me up. That's actually, that page that I have is from that Clayface arc, which is
Nice.
pretty sick, dude. Yeah,
That's good.
it's the whole Bat family in that new Belfry Tower that they have made, and it's got a good shot of Batman and Tim Drake, and then another shot of Clayface and the expressionism. Ooh, wee, that was a good arc.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, that was a good arc. Oh, yep.
Yeah, if I wasn't in the middle of getting ready to read a bunch of stuff, I would probably give that a gander. But there's a lot to reread. I'm thinking an Alan Moore Swamp Thing, Alan Moore and Steve Bissette Swamp Thing reread is very much in order. So
there you go.
And every summer always, as if it's been more than like the last 2 years, but I'm doing an annual Sandman reread for every summer because I don't know, it's Sandman, it's great.
Yeah, there you go.
Mark McKeever says it took the Bendis effect to drop his favorite character off of Superman. He says that sadly DC is still butchering the character. Oof. Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, we come from a very same camp, man. Like I wouldn't have deigned to drop a Batman book until reading 60 issues of Tom King and being satisfied for like 35, unsatisfied for 35 of them, so I get it, man. I totally get your pain. And BT Productions is similar camp. He's a big fan of Batman, but him and the Joker become so oversaturated at this point that I become a Superman fan. Yeah, that's how it, I mean, that's how it happens. I think I'm so fucking tired of the Joker, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But the Batman oversaturation I can deal with to a certain degree because the character's super versatile and you can do a lot with him.
Yeah.
Although again, I prefer him not to be oversaturated. I do complain about it. But the Joker, the thing that kills me about the Joker is this constant overuse, is a total misunderstanding of who he is. Joker is good when he comes back after 5 years of being away, and it is the sharpest end of the sword.
Yeah.
And it just pierces through you. The reason Death of the Family was so good in the New 52 was because they didn't touch Joker for about 3 years, and the first thing you see is Joker with his fucking face cut off.
Yeah, and stapled back on.
Right. That was a great way to reinvigorate the character. But when you have an ongoing Joker book, it takes all the fun out of him. It regularizes him. And the big problem is, and you're already seeing it now from what I understand with the Joker book, is that it's not even really about Joker. It's about Jim Gordon. They put the name Joker on it to sell.
Yeah, they did. They 100% did. I bought that book because people told me it was a Jim Gordon book. I saw the Joker book was coming, and I was like, I can't. And then the first issue, the Joker himself is literally in 2 panels at the end of the book. It is entirely about Jim Gordon and his relationship and experiences with the Joker. That's a book that I'll throw my money at. But I understand that a book called Jim Gordon Chases the Joker probably wouldn't sell.
But you know what kills me, dude, is that if they marketed it as a Jim Gordon book, I'd buy it. And I know I'm in the minority. And the only reason I'm not buying it is because I know if I do, because I want to get good Jim Gordon story, it's going to contribute to that market of Joker saturation, right?
Yeah.
It's going to tell them that we want the Joker book. And while a bunch of people do want more Joker, because if I might say so. I think a lot of people misunderstand why he's a special character, but I don't want to contribute to that. So therefore, I'm
Fair
now
enough.
depriving myself of reading a Jim Gordon story, who I love. I think Jim Gordon is one of the greatest supporting characters in all of fiction,
Yeah.
not just comics. So it does kind of break my heart in that way, man.
Yeah. Just wait. Just read it once it hits DC Universe and on the subscription app, then you can read it.
I will. That is definitely the plan. You know what? Like, I could just be a total douche and read like one of my press preview copies, and that's it. But I really only use the preview copies with the intent of actually trying to buy things.
Fair
It
enough.
also doesn't hurt that, again, like my pull list is anywhere from like 150 to $200 a month. So
Yeah. It's comics be
yeah,
expensive, yo.
comics be expensive, yo. You should make that into a shirt.
I should.
That would be
It's
That'd be a
insane.
good one. But yeah, man, everybody's kind of saying a lot of the same stuff. It was great chatting with everybody tonight. I think this is a pretty natural conclusion of the conversation. And before we do totally close out, WildeBeard, man, do you have any more sort of final thoughts on the topic of comic book speculation?
Oh, I mean, we covered a lot. I think it's a complex topic, and I think the question that Joey asked was really a great one. That does it help the industry, and I don't think it helps, but it can help and it can hurt. It's a double-edged sword that can be wielded really really dangerously. I think that people need to listen to why a book is selling, and is it because there's a new character and people are saying, oh, this is going to be amazing and that's a new character and it's going to be worth money, or are they genuinely interested in that character? So it's dangerous, and if it gets out of hand again, it could be really disastrous for an industry that a lot of us love.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your sentiments there. And before I go into mine, I want to make sure before people tap out, because every time they hear it's the end of the video, they tap out. Leave a like, please and thank you. Let us know that this is the type of stuff that you want to see. Therefore, I know that you want me to have WildeBeard back, and we'll go further into the speculator topic or talk about something totally different, because I personally had a good time.
Yeah.
So make sure you leave a like, subscribe, hit that big sexy subscribe button down below. Click the link in the description. Go hit the big sexy subscribe button next to his channel icon too. But closing out my thoughts, generally, I still have a severe distaste for speculation, especially when it pertains to the immediacy of the direct market. If you are going to speculate, I think you should speculate on creators, bet on people. Right? Like, if you're going to bet on anything, I'm sure this is a quote that I'm stealing from somewhere and I just can't think about it. If you're going to bet on anything, bet on people. But at the end of the day, I want people to be able to enjoy these things. Like, and I feel that not only as a fan who is tired of speculation, but as a young creator, I'm not getting into comics because I think I'm going to be rich, right? Like, I'm getting into comics because I think that I have stories to tell that I think are going to be valuable, that are going to be entertaining to people, and that are going to be connectable. Like the one out of everything that I've aspired to do in making comics, I most to look forward to, if this day arises where somebody comes up to me at a convention and says, I read this thing and it changed my life, because that's the ultimate, it's the ultimate honor.
Yep.
I've definitely read comics that have totally changed my outlook on really important things, or changed my just altered me in a really palpable, tangible way.
Yep. Yeah, I've read. There's a couple that just like strike at the core of my being and mirror emotional beats in my own life, and you're like, oh damn, that hit me a lot harder than I thought. And sometimes it even takes a while for that to completely resonate. But
Right.
yeah, seeing this hobby and this medium that we love for those reasons, seeing emotional beats mirrored in our own lives in those, or just yourself being a creator, hoping that you can be that moment for someone else, all of that is undercut by people that want to just leverage this hobby to make a quick buck and make it a hustle, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah, comics are an art form. Like, you're not seeing people leveraging novels. You're not seeing people leveraging poems. You're not seeing people leveraging films. This is something to experience and to feel. and not a something to be, this isn't fucking Bitcoin.
Yeah.
This shouldn't be some gimmick to make money. So if I can leave anything, it's with people is buy comics if you enjoy them, if you want to experience them, if you want to take place in the act of expressionism that these creators are trying to curate for you. And it doesn't have to be that deep. It doesn't have to be some crazy, thoughtful, Alan Moore-esque story that I pretentiously preach all the time. It can be this cool shoot 'em out action flick of a comic book, but engage with them because you enjoy them.
Yep.
Not because you want to swing a quick buck. And hopefully, if you get more and more people to do that, it contributes to a much more positive industry, a much more positive market that surrounds the art of making a comic book as opposed to first appearances and straight out bullshit. So
Yep.
that's all that I can say. If you want to bet on a really great comic book, check out Area 51, the Helix Project. Link in the description has everything you need to know about this crazy 1970s UFO hysteric sci-fi story. Has some cool government conspiracy, DNA, extraterrestrial DNA bred super soldiers, but is low-key kind of just a story about father and son, identity, mental health. Give it a look. I promise you'll like it if you give it give it a shot.
100%.
Only 24 hours left, just about, for it. We are just a hair away from breaking $7,100. So be the person to do it. BT Productions says, this was a great stream. Thank you, man. I appreciate you joining. I appreciate all of your talking points that you added to the conversation. And I also want to thank the likes of Ed Boy in the Cut for joining us, and Mark McKeever as well. You all contributed so much to this conversation. I actually genuinely do believe that the live chat tonight was absolutely crucial to how well this show went. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being such an important part of this conversation. And obviously, man, WildeBeard, it's great to finally have you on. I had an awesome time chatting with you. Is there anything you want to let the folks know at home about that they can look forward to on your channel?
Just do weekly comic reviews, more than I can probably handle. Get my fat stack every Wednesday, come home, usually hit the X-Men stuff first, because that's my love right now for always and forever. And X-Men's in a good spot right now, unlike maybe Batman. So check those out, and then other reviews later on in the week. Every Monday, I also post a video of the comics that I'm picking up that week, just kind of a nice little preview of the week to come. And I also go over people's comments from the previous week's video. So if you have some discussion points of your own, drop those in the comments on that video series and we can talk about it there.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody go click that link in the description. Go check his channel out. Very immersive, very interactive with his community, which is awesome. You don't see that a lot anymore. It becomes all about the cha-ching, who's going to throw money at you. And man, I can tell you that he's definitely not that type of guy. So
no, try not to be.
Yeah, so it's a strength in and of itself, with also obviously a very unique perspective on the books that he's reviewing. And I think you keep getting better and better, man. Like, and that's the true test of somebody creating content is not growing stagnant, and continuing to get better. So that's a huge compliment. Give him a look. Subscribe to me. We just crossed 700 subscribers. We are on the race to 1,000, in which I have a lot of really cool stuff that I've been accumulating for the past year and a half to give away once we hit 1,000. The likes of a Greg Capullo signed Dark Knight's metal print, various trades, hardcovers, copies of my book, shirts, a bunch of stuff. Like I really want to go all out. Give me a good reason to. Let's knock that shit out, baby. And again, this has been another fantastic episode of Let's Talk Comics. I appreciate you all for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.